Celtics Beat is powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network.
Well, folks, Celtics seemingly on the cusp of their second finals trip in 3 years, thanks to a thrilling Game 3 victory in Indiana. C's win 114-111. Boston up 3-0 in the Eastern Conference Finals. Again, one win away from the NBA Finals. And as we all know, every team that's ever been up this much in the conference finals has always won, except for almost that one time where Boston came back last year. But the Jayson Tatum ankle sprain put a quick end to that. It was an amazing game, Game 3. And with that, we bring in the ringers, Brian Barrett, Evan Valenti here, no Adam Kaufman today. Barrett, I got to tell you, man, this is an interesting one because in order to come back, because the C's were down a lot in this game. They were down, 18 points. That was their biggest deficit in the second half. We'll break it all down, obviously, but just like right off the bat, the Celtics can't win this game without execution on both ends of the floor. It was one of the biggest, most impressive wins of the year, if not the biggest, most impressive win of the year. Again, complete team effort, a 15-4 run in the last 3 minutes of the game. And Barrett, if you're one of those people looking for the Celtics need a clutch crunch time win on the road, as everybody's been complaining about, this is the game you were looking for. Celtics made a statement last night.
Yeah, it was impressive for so many reasons, especially considering the way that they didn't play defense in the first half and the way they completely turned that around in the second half where they were downright dominant. Indiana had, 42 points in the entirety of the second half. They were much better on that end. But offensively in the third quarter, they weren't great. They outscored the Pacers, 24-21. So then what they were able to do on both ends of the floor in the fourth quarter was just so impressive to me. And obviously, Jrue steals the show late, literally, with that just unbelievable play. I still can't believe he's on the team. Somehow the Celtics have found a way they traded away Marcus Smart, and somehow Brad found a way to get a better version of Marcus Smart on this team, what he brings offensively and what he brings defensively, with bringing in Kristaps Porzingis. So, of course, we're hoping that he's back for Game 4, at the very least, Game 1 of the NBA Finals. But the thing that sticks out, and by the way, Jrue had the and one, too, critical play in the game to take the lead. But to me, the biggest thing in this game is Jayson Tatum's performance. 36 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists. And with everything that had sort of transpired over the previous 48 hours, and really throughout this postseason, because a week and a half ago, it was that Anthony Edwards has already passed Jayson Tatum, as if Jayson Tatum, this is the beginning of his career, and we haven't seen this guy be the best player in a team that took a team to an NBA Finals. I know he wasn't good in the finals, but he did that at the age of 23, right? And what we saw from Tatum was everything you needed to see. Playmaking, scoring, defense, and the pass that he made to Al Horford, hit that critical 3. That is just an amazing pass that you can only make it behind the back. It's a behind the back bounce pass, not even a regular pass, bounce pass to Al Horford. So I thought, to me, he needed this performance for himself, probably because he didn't shoot the ball well in the previous game. Up until that previous game, he had been doing everything else right. I mean, he was averaging, prior to that game last night, 25, 10, and 5.5. And all of a sudden, we're talking about the guy isn't good in the playoffs. But the thing that sticks out to me more so than anything else is just, I think this is his second best playoff game in his career. The first one to me is Milwaukee Game 6, where backs against the wall, you need that win to extend to a Game 7. And it was really just an unbelievable shooting performance. He hit 7 threes. That was about, hey, he was red hot. In this game in particular, on Saturday night, it was everything. I mean, he had 23 assist points in this game to go along with the 36 points. I mean, Al hit 7 threes. 5 of them were passes from Jayson Tatum, where Tatum was just stringing out the pick and roll, taking the extra defender with him, showing the patience, giving him enough time to throw the ball back to Al Horford so Al could can threes. And I know people can look at game 7 against Philly last year, where he had the 50. But that game was sort of a blowout. It was in hand the whole time. And it was a great performance. I'm not taking anything away from that. That's how impressed I was with the game on Saturday, because he had 36, 10, and 8. And I felt it was just, that was his game. He completely controlled everything start to finish from an offensive perspective. He was outstanding. So I thought that was a huge game for Tatum.
Yeah, I want to get to Tatum a little bit later because it's just an outrageous performance. But like I just think if just highlighting Tatum doesn't quite do this game justice, in my opinion. It's a complete team effort, right? The Celtics, the last 18 minutes and 4 seconds went on a 48-27 run, which is 18. They were down 18 at that point. It didn't seem feasible, right? They kept chipping away, and India would kind of punch back. But if you look at all the things that happened, obviously the big 3-pointer by Al Horford to make it a 2-point game with a minute to go, that was ginormous. Jaylen Brown's dunk over Miles Turner with 4 minutes left in the game that everybody seems to have forgotten about in the aftermath of the game, but that was a huge, huge, huge swing for them. Tatum was outrageous, and he was unbelievable in the second half. Derek White, after missing basically everything in the first 3 quarters, was huge. He had a giant 3 with 5 minutes to go, and that after like bricking a wide open one. That one was an easier step into. Just it looked more natural for Derek White. He had a putback on an offensive rebound that I thought was pretty huge. One of the things I look for with Derek is that mid-range floater. If that's on, he's just going to be tough to beat. Holiday had 6 points all to him in the fourth quarter, the layup and one, as you said, with 38 seconds left. And here's another one that I think is going to get lost in the shuffle here. I thought Joe Mazzulla was excellent in this game, right? If you think about the timeouts that he called in this game, I thought were really great. I thought some of the defensive stuff they did was really great. If you think about what after the game, you heard some of the quotes that he said during the game. I've heard this from several different players at this point, but they all said, that he was like, hey, look, Dallas was down 18 the other night. They won the game. We're not out of this thing. Let's go. Tillman got some important minutes in this game. I think everybody, again, to come back down 18, yes, Jayson Tatum was outrageous, but Al had 20-plus points. Jrue Holiday was clutch towards the end. Jaylen Brown had some big points in the second half to keep them close. This is not just on Tatum. It has to be a complete effort on both ends of the floor to come back down 18. I think if we don't kind of bring it all together, we're not giving everybody their fair credit, I think.
Yeah, and even Mazzulla, the play that he drew up to get Tatum an opportunity at the rim when they were up 112, 111, that was an outstanding play after the timeout. One of Mazzulla's strengths has been over the past 2 seasons, they've either been first or second in points per possession after timeouts. I was a little bit aggravated in game 2. It took them so long to go small, and finally they did that, and that was the game where Brissett was outstanding. But I also would say something that sort of carried over from game 2 is they actually were careful with Al's minutes in game 2, where Horford only played 25 minutes in game 2. So what we saw was Al was fresh and Al was spry in this game. I mean, they blocked 8 shots in the third quarter alone in this game, right? I mean, and even like you pointed out, Derek White with the putback, he had that huge contest on Siakam late in the game, where Siakam, I don't want to say he had beaten Tatum, but he had a chance to get a shot off. Derek White comes out of nowhere, makes a nice play in help, and they score on the other end. So there were so many big plays throughout the course of this game. And the bench didn't really have it at all. So you needed your starters to play heavy minutes. But I go back to the game 5 against Cleveland when Al also had a huge game, 22 points, 15 rebounds. That came off a game where he played less than 30 minutes too. So it's almost like, hey, once in a while, you're just going to cut back on the Al minutes. And I understand that they're in a tough situation because of obviously the Kristaps Porzingis injury. But I thought top to bottom, to your point, it was an outstanding effort. And to me, the Jrue plays are just, they're so loud. There's such big moments. And I don't know how he continues to, well, I guess I should by now. I mean, he's one of the best defenders of his generation, but it's weird because he basically, it's not like Nembhard was trying to cross him up and he stole it from him, right? He literally beat Nembhard to his own dribble to the right side, right?
After falling down. He falls down, recovers, and then beats him to the spot. That's outrageous.
Right. Like normally, when you see a steal, it's usually like, okay, it's either on a crossover or the guy's dribbling with his right hand. You tip it with your left hand and you pick it up on the other side and you go the other way. Right. Or it's like a strip near the bat, like something like that. You don't see a lot of steals the way that Jrue Holiday gets them, where he literally beat the guy to his right-handed dribble when the guy was pushing the ball that way, right? Where he wasn't even trying to go by Jrue at that point. He's like going back towards almost like the 3-point line. It just, and I thought Tatum hit the nail on the head after the game where he said he just has unbelievable instincts. And I'm like, that makes total sense. Like he's always in the right spot. Like that play is almost like a guy when they guess a player is going to Euro step in the right direction and they take the charge because they guess right. He just knew that Nembhard was going back to his right hand, and Nembhard had been awesome in the game up until that point. It's just an unbelievable play by Jrue. I'm sitting here in my apartment just yelling, going nuts. I couldn't believe it happened, but it was just remarkable play by Jrue, especially considering he gutted it out. Tatum was saying the guy had the chills during the morning. He was dealing with an illness during the day, and he shows up, does that, and then gives his jersey to Flavor Flav.
Yeah, I mean, just the way to top off the night, handing the jersey to Flavor Flav. It's usually an impressive thing. Quick break from today's show to tell you today's show is powered by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like Meek Mill and Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, now you can find community plays onto the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community every single week, and get on all the playoff action for basketball and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take the game to a whole new level during the postseason. You can now bet up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Turn $10 into 1,000 with basketball, with hockey, baseball, on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. And Prize Picks is now the official daily fantasy sponsor of CLNS. And thanks for a new partnership, our listeners get a pretty sweet new deal to sign up with Prize Picks. Just download the app, use the promo code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's promo code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100 after you download the app. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
But by the way, random question: would you put that jersey on at that point? Like, he just played, 40 minutes or something like that?
Not only that, he's sick. Like, just gonna get sick. Like, I don't know. I guess maybe not at that moment. Let it air it out a little bit, like just like hang in the basement, like on the clothesline or whatever, and just let it air out for a day or two. Then put that bed. Put it on for like game 4, right? Put it on. Let it rest for like 24 hours. Then because eventually I'd be like, I have Jrue's like flu game jersey. I would absolutely wear that. Are you kidding me? I guess the question would be, do you wash it? But I think to keep the mojo going, you don't want to be the bad luck guy. So I probably just let it until the season was over. Then I'd probably wash it. But Jrue has been such a great player for them this entire season, especially in these playoffs and especially lately. Like this series, I think he's been probably his best basketball the entire season. And talk about saving the best for last. He's had huge offensive nights in a lot of these games, and last night, Saturday night, it was a lot of the defensive stuff. And like when you look at Boston defensively, like I know they're not getting the credit that Dallas is getting and the credit that Minnesota is getting currently, for their defensive chops. Minnesota, obviously, the best defensive team in the league this year, and Dallas has been like the best defensive team since the All-Star break. But Boston also has just an insane amount of guys that can guard their yard, so to speak. And if you look at some of the adjustments they made in the second half of this game, like if you break down the halves, the Celtics allowed 42 points in the paint in the first half alone. As you mentioned earlier, allowed 42 points total in the second half, right? That's a huge, huge, huge boom for Boston. Indiana only had 26 points in the second half. They were 64% from the field in the first half, 38% from the field in the second half. Boston's defense, led by Jrue Holiday, who was kind of doing his own thing at times. Like sometimes he'll just like play free safety and just go double someone and create havoc. I thought Boston did a great job with their rim pressure in the second half. But Jrue Holiday's, steal and all the block, like 12 blocks in this game. Like it's just, again, all around team effort. Jrue Holiday though, with the flu game, like obviously not Jordan flu game-esque, but making the biggest play at the right time at the end of the game. The N1, the steal, the 2 free throws, like on the road. I mean, that's why you trade Jrue Holiday right there for sure.
Yeah, and I got to think that if you're Milwaukee right now, you got to be thinking to yourself, we couldn't find a third team, a contender when we were making this trade. Like we couldn't send Jrue somewhere else besides Portland because they knew that Jrue was going to get traded once they sent him to Portland, right? So it's just going to sting for Milwaukee fans. But it's such a smart move by Brad, and give ownership a ton of credit too, where I'm sure the question was asked, hey, we're going to be paying a heavy tax bill. Does this get us closer to a championship? And Brad said, hell yeah, let's go. Let's go do it. Here's the deal. And they knew exactly what it was going to be. I said the day that they traded Jrue when Jrue was traded in that deal for Milwaukee, you know what it's going to be. It's Brogdon's contract, it's Robert Williams, and it's 2 firsts. Would you do it for Jrue Holiday? Absolutely. It gives you at least a window for 2 years now that he's extended for the extra years after this. But you figure at least 2 years, you have a window to win a championship where Holiday is still pretty close to his prime, especially on the defensive end of the court. And it's just the whole thing about the defense, it's so perplexing how bad they were in the first half, where it's just like, to your point, the points in the paint, it's direct line drives to the basket. Like they were just getting into the paint at will. It felt like from an effort standpoint, it wasn't there, but to go from basically giving no effort in the first half defensively to completely dialing it up in the second half and being able to do that, it just sort of shows you what this team is capable of on that end. And this is all without your best rim protector, right? Like I have to attribute some of the pace, and I'm not making excuses, but some of the successes, there's no fear, right? I mean, I mentioned the 12 blocks, but it's your point guard had 4 of them, right? Derek White had 4 of the blocks, right? There's not like
Miles Turner, which is the funniest thing of all time.
Oh, the turnaround one was just so dumb by Turner. Like that was the anticipation by Derek White there. But my point being is just like, you don't have the fear factor going in there against the Celtics now. You may get blocked, but with Porzingis there, it's a different thing. And I do think in some sense, the first half, I think that the Celtics had to adjust to what the Pacers were doing offensively. And on the other end, they had to adjust too, because without Halliburton, as crazy as this sounds, it felt like they were playing faster. Like the ball was moving quicker. And I did feel like at times when Halliburton was playing, because their offense is so frenetic in a good way, it did feel like they were getting a little bit predictable in game 2 when Halliburton was playing, where it was so much pick and roll, high pick and roll with Halliburton, where the Celtics kind of understood what Indiana was doing on that end of the court. And that kind of switched in this game. And the other thing that I think the Celtics had to adjust to was what they were doing offensively. Because if you think about what the early 2 games were in the series, it was, okay, Halliburton's on Jrue or Halliburton's on Derek White. Like, come up here, we're going to get a switch with Tatum. And obviously last night, that was not the case. So I did think that first half, sometimes when you, like, we saw the same thing in the Cleveland game when Donovan Mitchell went out the first half. Remember, Cleveland was just shooting the ball like crazy. So I do think it took the Celtics a bit to adjust there. And from a maturation standpoint, the Celtics have had a game like this in each series. Game 2 against Miami, Miami shot the lights out. Game 2 against Cleveland, Cleveland shot the lights out. And the Celtics' defensive effort was not great in each of those games. Well, in this game, it wasn't in the first half. Indiana shot better than those 2 teams shot, like one of the best shooting halves we've ever seen in the history of the playoffs. And the Celtics stepped it up and won that game. That's the game that they ordinarily lose, and they won this one.
It's amazing because it's like 64% from the field in the first half, and it's all on twos. Is what was the craziest part. It's Nembhard getting north-south. And I just want to, on a side note, like Andrew Nembhard, that guy rocks. I get very like kind of Tyrese Maxey vibes from him, but of just a mid-range, just absolute unbelievable jump shooter. TJ McConnell, I'm going to punch in the face by the end of this series. He is just such a pest. That guy floats in the air. He's exceptional at jumping up in the air, hanging on, like on the way down. Like Jaylen does this too, but on the way down, just like finding a little bit of daylight and just floating that thing up there. I felt like he had 100% of those. It was outrageous, but they were just getting shredded. And they talked about it after the game. Joe, Jason, Al, they talked about how they weren't quite sure what to expect out of Indiana in that first half without Halliburton, and it took them some time to adjust. But obviously, the adjustments were made because Boston defensively was just ridiculous in the second half. But as we mentioned kind of earlier in the show, this is a just masterful Jayson Tatum performance. He's the first guy in the history of the game to have 38, 10, 8 and 2 blocks, no turnovers. That's the stat, I think. And for me, like I've been a big proponent of just because Jayson Tatum doesn't shoot the ball well doesn't mean he's not having a good game. It's been driving me crazy from all these people that are like, oh my goodness, like Jayson Tatum stunk last night. I'm like, okay, no. He didn't shoot well last night, but he does everything else at an extremely elite level. He's playing defense really well. Like I know in game 2, the first half was not the best Jayson Tatum performance, but he was way better in the second half and made up for it. He wasn't great in some of the first game, but he was ridiculous in overtime, had 30 whatever points. Like Tatum's been amazing in most of this playoff series. And last night, start to finish, he was incredible. And I knew going into the game that it was going to be a big Jayson Tatum game because, like, as much as people want to make a big deal out of certain performances, great players play great on the road, right? Like, this is when you're home, that's when your role players are doing well. That's when Grant Williams hits a cajillion threes. Like, that's what happens on the road in the playoffs. That's when the best players make names for themselves. Tatum, obviously, the 40-point game against Milwaukee in Game 6 is the most famous one. This one is right below it for me. Just a complete masterclass. Defensively, orchestrating the offense, hitting big shots, 5 of 10 from three-point range. One of the best performances we've seen from him in his career. And for this postseason, I'd say it's his best all-around performance.
Yeah, and he said after the game he loves game threes, which he's a big game 3 guy because it's like the first time playing in a different building. Hey, man, if you're going to love game 3, I'm all for it because he was obviously tremendous. So you agree with me. You had this in front of the game 7, the 50 points that he had against Philly.
They crushed Philly that game. Again, it's at home too, right? Like I almost would say Tatum's performance in game 6 against Philly at the end of that game was more impressive than game 7 because how bad he was.
Yeah.
And he needed all of his, I forget how many points he scored in the fourth quarter, but
he hit the 3 threes.
Yeah. And picked on Embiid like every time down the floor. But like, I would say I would put this, above that game 7 performance. No question.
I agree. I still would say Milwaukee is his best performance, even though this game may have been more complete, like what he did in terms of his playmaking, his passing. He was running everything offensively for the Celtics in this game, more so than I think at any point this postseason. And he's had great playmaking games throughout this run, but it felt like he handled the ball way more than Derek White did in this game. And they love running the offense through Derek White, and Derek White's been outstanding doing that. So why not do it? But I also felt like they also it felt like, I don't know, I would have to look at the tracking data. I haven't seen it yet in terms of the amount of screens that Al set for Tatum, because we haven't seen that a ton. Like, naturally, they'll use Al as a screener, but they like using him as a spacer more, because if you think about the Celtics' bread and butter play, it's either Derek White setting a screen for Tatum or Tatum setting a screen for Derek White, right? That's how they sort of create these mismatches. And in this game last night, and maybe part of it was Mazzulla and the coaching staff, Sam Cassell, Charles Lee, realized like, hey, they're probably going to stick with Tatum if Al sets a high pick and roll, because one of the things that we saw, especially early on in this series, and even going back to Cleveland, you have to pick your poison, right? So a lot of teams are willing to say, all right, if Al Horford, and Al had not shot the 3 well throughout this postseason until this game last night. If you look at the numbers, the past 2 years, his shooting in the postseason has been way down compared to the regular season. I attribute a lot of that to fatigue, being tired. That's why I thought the 25 minutes, the previous game, was so huge. But they're willing to live with Al shooting. So saying, all right, if Tatum's getting a screen from Horford, Tatum did, instead of just attacking all the time, Tatum strung it out. Like, he would dribble the ball out to the right wing, make sure that that defender is coming to recover. And before Al's defender, in the case, whoever it is, before Al's defender can get back to Al, Tatum's already throwing the ball to Horford. So Horford has a wide open 3-point opportunity. That to me felt like a new wrinkle. So all in all, the playmaking stuff from Tatum was the thing that stuck out to me more so than anything else. Like, obviously he got his 3-point shot back. He was 5 of 10 from 3. And he shot the ball with confidence. And I didn't really think there was many bad threes that he took in this game. My one gripe with Tatum throughout the postseason is the early shot clock pull-ups. And it's like, you can get that at any point, right? Like, you can get that at any point during the offense. And you almost feel like you're letting the defense off the hook in some instances. But I felt like most of the shots that Tatum took in this game were really good shots. I thought he was outstanding. But to me, his ability now to just take on, like, this is sort of what, and not to bring up Perk, but this is sort of what the difference between, and this is not meant to sound like an indictment on Jaylen, the difference between Jaylen and Tatum is, and we're seeing Anthony Edwards really struggle with this in the Dallas series as a playmaker because he's seeing all these bodies. Tatum's growth and maturation process as a facilitator has been incredible. I don't even think he's capable of this game 2 years ago, the year they went to the NBA Finals, where he knows where everybody's going to be. He's really good at taking on double teams. Like, even if you think about the play, the highlight play, the behind the back pass, he said after the game, he knew where Al was going to be because he knows every spot the guy's supposed. When he makes this movement, somebody's going to be in the corner. It's just, he's at a different level now as a playmaker. And I'm not saying he's the same level of playmaker as like the elite of the elite. Like, I'm not putting him in the Luka Doncic category when it comes to that, but from where he started to where he is now, like that's an awfully difficult job to take on. Like even Kevin Durant, who's one of the greatest scorers in the history of the league, he can't run an offense the way that Tatum does. And I'm not saying that makes Tatum a better player. I'm just saying there's not a lot of guys at that position that can handle that type of playmaking load.
Quick break from today's show to tell you today's show is brought to you by Game Time. The NBA playoffs are here. I don't know about you guys. I am dying to get my hands on some tickets to any one of these playoff games for the Celtics. I would love to be inside TD Garden to experience the atmosphere. And with Game Time, it's never been easier or faster to get playoff tickets. And prices on Game Time app, they actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off. And with last-minute killer deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and lowest price guaranteed, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. You can pick out any game you want. It doesn't matter. You find the game, they have tickets for you, okay? No question about it. And you can even customize your spot, look for some inspiration from Game Time. Let's say like, hey, I want to have this view, but that's what I'm really looking for. You can limit it. You can narrow your focus down to zone deals. You can buy flash deals. Or you can view from your seat and lowest price guaranteed every single time. They have last minute deals. You can save to 60% off buying last minutes for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. It's not just NBA. I know we're an NBA podcast, but you can get, let's say, Sebastian Maniscalco's coming around. You want to see that guy in concert? He's hilarious. I look into it, and you can save even more when you choose a section like Game Time. Choose the seats for you with some sweet zone deals. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, the redeem code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And that's the biggest thing when they went to the NBA Finals 2 years ago against the Warriors. I know everybody was disappointed because they blew an opportunity to win the NBA title. I absolutely understand that. I thought it was valuable that Tatum got playmaking reps in the finals against a team that had a lot of good defensive players on it. I have been in the corner of like point Tatum is going to be the thing that brings this team to the next level, right? To the championship level. He has to learn how to facilitate in order to make life easier for everybody else on this team. Like he doesn't have to be LeBron. I'm not saying like he has to be the queen of the chessboard, so to speak. I don't think he has to do that when you have Jrue Holiday and Derek White around you. I think that's totally necessary, but he has to be able to make plays for other guys. And the comfortability with it now, right? The fact that he's been seeing double teams and like playing Miami the past cajillion years and all the things they would do to him, playing Nick Nurse teams. And I know people are going to be like, dude, Nick Nurse's teams have always had interesting schemes to throw the Celtics, whether it was in the bubble or anything after that, right? It's to me the maturation of getting reps and becoming more comfortable with that. And this is the culmination of that. You don't have this game. Again, the 8 assists, 0 turnovers is it may be the most impressive part of the whole thing. Like you don't have this game unless you have reps doing it in previous seasons and doing it in the playoffs when defenses get ratcheted up a little bit. Like this is the part that I think people miss when they're, and I'm not here to dump on Anthony Edwards because he's 22 years old. It's the first time he's been this far as the lead guy on an NBA team. I'm not going to dump on him. This is going to be a good experience for him. Tatum is proof of the pudding that getting these reps in playoff games you can't put a price on that because you can't simulate this pressure, this intensity, everything ratcheted up. Every shot, every possession matters. And Tatum played like every possession mattered last night, every time in the ball in his hands.
Yeah, and maybe like you learn a lesson from that Golden State series, as painful as it was. I mean, they were up 2-1 with a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter of Game 4. They easily could have won the NBA Finals, and then they lose. But to going back to Tatum here is one of the things too is the difference between him and Anthony Edwards is obviously Tatum is more seasoned at this point. He's been in the league longer, and he's a better playmaker at this point. But the other thing is just Brad Stevens has done an outstanding job putting the pieces around him, right? Where if you think about the Derek White trade, we've seen what Derek White can do as a screener, as a ball handler, as a playmaker. And then the other component, which of course Tatum didn't have in the game last night, is this year they bring in a guy that is north of 7 feet that can shoot threes, but can also post up, create mismatches. So they've done so many things to put the right personnel around Tatum. It's very rare that Tatum now is going to be out on the court without everybody around him being able to shoot, with the exception of the minutes when Brissett comes into the game or Cornette is playing as a role man, right? Like, they have surrounded Tatum with a ton of shooting, which obviously it makes your maturation process as a playmaker easier because you have all these guys around you that can hit shots. I mean, we've seen him in the past make the right play, but guys just didn't knock down the shots. So for Tatum to have this game, I think it's important for him to have it before the finals, because I'm not saying his confidence was shaken. He was making all the right plays, but at some point you need to have this type of game where you're like, I am by far the best player in this series, and I'm going to prove I'm the best player in this series. And he did that in this game. And I think sort of an underrated part of this is going back to sort of the relationship with Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Jaylen goes off in the previous game. He has the 40 points. And he was good in this game. He had 24 points. I know he didn't shoot the three well, but you mentioned some of the critical plays he had down the stretch. He had the huge dunk, as you mentioned, but he also had that little mid-ranger where he hung in the air. He's able to knock that thing down. But Jaylen was willing to realize, like, oh, this is a Tatum game. Like, Tatum's manipulating the whole defense, so I'm going to let Tatum do his thing. And we've seen in previous games, Tatum's like, Jaylen, you go do your thing. Like, it depends on what the matchup is. And I'm sure Indiana, part of their game plan in this thing is, hey, we got to make sure we don't get beat by Jaylen Brown, because we just got beat by Jaylen Brown in 2 consecutive games. So I think that's also part of it too, is just how much these guys have grown together. And I said this on my pod last night, Valenti, not to get completely off course here, but to me, this championship, from a Celtics fan's perspective, right? Obviously, you and I did not witness the championships they won in the 1980s, right? But 2008 championship was awesome because the Celtics had been through a lot of tragedies off the court. They were a tragic franchise at that point based on what they were. You think about the Pitino era, it was just a complete dumpster fire. Like, imagine a team now trading the 3rd overall pick in the draft, just 50 games into his career with the team, in the case of Chauncey Billups. I know they had a moment there with Antoine and Paul Pierce, but 2008, like, we hadn't gone through all these painful moments with Garnett and Ray Allen. They had their painful moments when, of course, Ray Allen was screwed by the NBA in 2001, where they wanted Allen Iverson and the Sixers in the series, so the officiating was poor. Kevin Garnett never had the proper team around him and took a team all the way to the conference finals in 2004, and we know what Pierce did here. But this team, to me, the reason I say it'd be more rewarding for me personally, selfishly as a fan, is we've seen all these guys go through it together, especially Tatum and Brown, and to a lesser extent, Al Horford, who, of course, was here and came back. And even Derek White, remember, at times against Golden State, he looked unplayable because he wasn't confident in his shot at that particular point in time. Now, this postseason, the guy's jacking up like north of 8 3-point attempts per game. So I just think, to me, this championship would be more rewarding because they had that the painful loss against Golden State. They had the painful loss against Miami. If they get it done, that's why I just think that this championship would be on a totally different level, because yes, you brought in great players. You brought in Derek White. Nobody thought that Derek White was this good when they traded for him. Jrue Holiday, yeah, people knew, but another team gave up on him. When they brought Al Horford back, people thought that was just about dumping Kemba Walker's contract, and that certainly wasn't the case. Of course, they brought in Porzingis. But Tatum and Brown are your guys. Like, they're homegrown. Your 2 best players are homegrown, and they've developed into these 2 guys. When, remember, people didn't like the Jaylen pick. They wanted Chris Dunn or Buddy Hield.
Yeah, except for yours truly. I was in the Jamal Murray or Jaylen Brown camp, so I feel good about that one. That one I'll take. But it's, or the people that was Dragon Bender that draft. I think Dragon Bender's that draft, right? The Jaylen draft where he's just an absolute stiff and can't.
Yeah, and it looks like that. I mean, the 3 best players from that draft are Murray, Jaylen, and Siakam, who the Celtics cannot stop Siakam in this series. My word.
Nobody can. The guy's been unbelievable. He's just hitting a bunch of crazy shots. I do want to piggyback on the, like, Tatum and Brown. This feels different, right? You know, I think it was Bob Myers on on the pregame show, I think, or maybe it was Legler after the game too. I can't quite remember because all of it just kind of now blends.
How could you remember? There's like 8 people on the set.
I know. Your boss mentions this all the time. Simmons, one of my favorite bits is just clowning on how many people are at the desk for all these shows. It's true. Like you get 10 seconds and then you got to go to commercial break. But it's the two of them play in tandem better than they ever have, right? These two, like, they know to get out of each other's way when one guy's feeling it over the other. They make plays for each other, right? Like, one of the things that I love about this series is like you talk about the spacing and Al Horford being a spacer, right? He has to bring Miles Turner out of the paint, and by just sitting in the corner on the weak side corner, all of a sudden Miles Turner is miles away from the play. Miles Turner, by the way, is the leading shot blocker in Pacers history for what it's worth. Getting him out of the paint, making the
more than Rick Schmitz.
Yeah, well, it doesn't take much, but it's Horford's gravity that pulls Turner out, and then everybody else can kind of feed off that. But Tatum and Brown, to your point of, like, if they can get this one, and they're well on their way to the NBA Finals and being 4 wins away from winning their 18th championship in the franchise history, it'll mean so much to a lot of fans because so many of us, I'll throw myself as a fan of this because I'm a fan and also commenting on the team. They wanted to break these two guys up forever. They can't get it done. How many trade packages has Jaylen been involved in? How many trade packages has that guy been a part of for Kawhi Leonard or Anthony Davis or Jimmy Butler or et cetera, et cetera?
Durant.
Yeah, and they've swatted all of them away, and they've kept these two together, and it looks like it might really pay off this year. But the maturation of both these guys, and again, this is I guess if you think about some of the things they've gone through as a tandem, like, this is why you keep, like, continuity matters, right? Keeping guys together for a while so they know how to play together matters. Like, in this landscape of all these teams always changing hands, and, like, we're all in the 2K-ification of the NBA, where the offseason is way more fun than the season because you get to play like GM and everybody's trying to trade everybody all over the place. Keeping guys together and letting them go through stuff together and learning together, this is like a ginormous case for that. Golden State, the past dynasty, is a huge case for that. Like, keeping guys together, keeping cores together to learn and evolve and grow. We're seeing it right before our eyes for sure. And for those of us that have watched Jaylen and Jayson from their rookie years, this is huge. I mean, you go back and watch, like, Jaylen Brown playing at high school against Ben Simmons, then clowning Ben Simmons in high school, and then going to Cal and not being able to hit a 3-point shot to save his life. And now he's just this mid-range maestro. And if he's wide open from 3, like, he's going to make more than he's going to miss. It's just amazing to watch where these two guys have come from.
Yeah, and Danny Ainge deserves a ton of credit on both draft picks, of course, especially Jaylen, because obviously when he had conversations with them, he saw and he heard something in Jaylen, because Jaylen was not considered to be the slam dunk 3rd overall pick like he was. And part of it is just the will of the player, right, to keep improving each and every year. And the fact now that he's 240 pounds and he wants to guard the Steph Currys of the world, the mentality that he has, which I think the mentalities are perfect together as well. I just think that the other portion of that is they're not a perfect fit in terms of what you would expect from a duo, right? It's not like Jokic and Murray, where one guy's a guard, one guy's a big, whether it's Stockton or Malone, where they have this great pick and roll chemistry. It's you have to work at it more when you basically play the same position. Now, it's a little bit different. As we mentioned, Tatum's doing more of the playmaking duties, but it's more like when Wade and LeBron teamed up, and I'm not comparing the players, obviously, but those guys played similar positions. They were more ball dominant, and they had to figure it out after the first year, where Wade started playing off the ball more and told LeBron, like, hey, you got to be the guy. And it worked out for them. Obviously, they won 2 championships, and LeBron's obviously one of the greatest players in the history of the sport. But you get the point. It's like you had to sort of adjust. I think, like, the interesting thing to me about, I think the NBA, the media, and I think fans have a tough time with this team in terms of rather just like the discourse, because we really haven't seen a team like this in NBA history win a championship. And what I mean by that is, like, if you just look at I went down a rabbit hole the other day. There has been 26 teams that have won 64 games or more. And if you look at those teams that didn't have 2 all-NBA players, and we talk about, like, the Jaylen snub.
We're going to get to that.
16. Okay, so the 6 teams that didn't have 2 all-NBA guys, the other 5 besides the Celtics this year with Tatum, they all had the MVP. 86 Bird, and that's when they only had 2 All-NBA teams. 87 Magic, still only 2 All-NBA teams. 07 Dirk, 09 LeBron, 18 Harden. So ordinarily when we see a championship team, they usually, and look, maybe we're having a different conversation in a couple of weeks from now if the Celtics win a title, but most people don't consider Tatum to be a top 3 player in the league. Maybe on the fringe of the top 5, but most people would say somewhere between 6 and 10. So that's sort of where this team is different than most teams in NBA history. And like I said, Tatum may get himself into this conversation in a couple of weeks, but it's just we don't ordinarily see the formula this way. So that's why I think maybe this is why people are so harsh on Tatum, is because this is sort of their proof of, see, they can't win it if he's their best player. It's like, okay, well, you're kind of missing the thing. Because if you look at it, they have Jaylen Brown is another top 20 player in the league. And then when you're looking at Porzingis, Derek White, and Jrue Holiday, you could argue all 3 of those guys are in the top 40, right? So you have top tier depth, unlike other teams have had in recent NBA history. And by the way, I just got to get this off the chest. Perk, for the record, thought the Celtics should trade Jaylen for Bradley Beal last summer. So that was another possible trade.
Well, we don't listen to Perk on this show, and it's probably for the best that everybody else doesn't listen to Perk on this show. I do want to get to a few things, but do you think that Tatum's a top 5 guy?
I would probably say he's like, I think the 4 at the top right now, Jokic is obviously, I would have him still as the best player in the league, despite the fact that they lost. And then I think you still have to put Giannis in that category because, I mean, he arguably had his best offensive season that he's had. And I think that just everything that Luka does offensively, he's like Tatum, we were talking about his playmaking. Luka's at a different level when it comes to that. I think most people would put Luka ahead of him. I think a lot of people would put Shea in front of him. I would probably have Tatum 5th, and I don't even know if that means I would put Shea in front of him. I mean, we can't even say a healthy Kawhi at this point. I would take Tatum over Embiid in a postseason setting. It's just in a regular season setting, Embiid is so dominant. But I would say probably I'd have him 5th, depending on where you had the other guys ranked. I think he's probably going to edge Shea entering next season just because of the run that the Celtics are going on. Although it could work in the reverse order too, where what if he doesn't have a good NBA Finals? And by the way, I'm not predicting that's going to happen. I'm just saying, I think that if he wants to have his stamp saying, hey, like Jokic, you can't take him out of the top 5 right now, right? Giannis, you can't take him out of the top 5 right now. If Tatum wins the NBA championship, I think that he has like a stamp, like, yes, and he has a great NBA Finals and he wins Finals MVP, which I think the Finals MVP is stupid anyway. I think they should do what they do in the NHL, the Conn Smythe, just give it to the playoff MVP. But anyway, I digress, because we wouldn't have had Andre Iguodala winning the Finals MVP. He shouldn't have won it anyway, but you get the point. But I think that if he wins the Finals, he'll be considered a top 5 player. I don't think right now, like if you asked 100 NBA analysts or if you asked the GM on every team, I think that Tatum would be considered top 5 in the minority of those ballots. I would probably have him 5th is probably where I'd have him.
Yeah, I have him like 5th or 6th. I think it just kind of depends. But I think if he wins the title, I think you can't. I mean,
deny it.
The guy's what, 5 out of 7 Eastern Conference Finals, been in 2 NBA Finals. Like I know people might have flashier stats, but winning games at the end of the day is all that matters. And the guy's won a ton of games. And I think if you were to win a title, that would stamp him top 5. And you know, it's like you said, to back you up for a second, like the Embiid in the regular season's a top 5 player, but in the playoffs he's not. Like Jimmy Butler's a top 5 playoff guy, but not a regular season guy. Tatum's, you know, doesn't matter playoffs, regular season, he's always showing up.
And the two-way ability, Valenti,
yeah.
like the two-way ability sort of, I feel like he doesn't get enough credit for that because this is such a good defensive team in terms of like Jrue and Derek White just made all defensive teams, but Tatum we know that he can be a great on-ball defender. He held Kevin Durant to 3 of 18 shooting in a series that the Celtics swept the Kevin Durant Nets a couple of years ago, but he's an outstanding off-ball defender as well. So I think that's the argument for Tatum getting into the top 5 too, is he's one of the most complete players in the league.
He's one of the most impactful two-way guys you're going to find. I think Giannis is similar in that regard, and I think that's what, you know, puts those two guys in a slightly different like stratosphere than some other guys. Like Luka's impressive as hell, and what they're doing in Dallas right now is amazing, and he's an incredible offensive player. But I think people are like, oh, he's trying on defense. I'm like, I still have like in my head watching Jaylen Brown just absolutely big boy him for an entire game. It's just be like, you can't guard me. I do want to just get a couple like rapid fire things. Boston's going to need somebody on their bench to start hitting threes, and Hauser's been just absolutely terrible. And I think if you're projecting forward here, I think Pritchard's been really good this postseason for the most part. I think he does the best he can for his size, and I think he's spreading the floor, he's hitting threes, he's shooting the ball with a ton of confidence whenever he shoots it. Hauser is the one to me that's got to really pick it up here. I've been really disappointed with because we all we're all pounding the table for him last year. More Hauser minutes, and this season was like, see what he's doing. He should play to the best. Like, now we're seeing maybe that's not the case. Hauser might be a little too much for him to chew on right now, but they need him to start hitting shots. I think you said this maybe your last pod, not the one you did last night, but previously. Like Hauser's just been an absolute zero out there, and he's got to find a way to get some rhythm. Man, it's killing me.
Yeah, he's 0 of 9 now from 3-point territory in this series, and this is sort of kind of his job. You're supposed to go out there.
1 of 13 in his last 5 games from 3-point range. 1 of 13.
Wow. So
shot 40% from there.
Yeah, and the other component too, Valenti, is he has been really bad defensively in this series. He's getting blown by. You can see that they're sort of seeking him out. There was in the game 2 win, McConnell scored him in back-to-back possessions. And there was a moment in this game 3 where he got beaten. He just sort of pointed to somebody else. Like, okay, I don't know if it was a miscommunication, but he's not playing well on that side. And then shooting, he looks awful. Like, I never thought Sam Hauser was going to miss. He airballed a 3. And like some of the other misses he's had, they're not like in and out. They're like really bad misses. So I think this has sort of become a mental thing with him. And with the bench in particular, I agree with you. I think Pritchard, it wasn't as great in game 3, but he has been tremendous throughout the postseason. I love the fact that he comes in, he's pushing the pace, he guards well. The ball pressure has been outstanding from Peyton Pritchard. But I will say, like, going forward, this is why the Porzingis thing is so important, is that means Al goes back to his other role, where you can bring Al off the bench, and Al can provide, as long as he's hitting the 3 consistently, some of that spacing. Because I do think when I'm looking at a potential matchup against, say, Dallas, like, you're going to have a lot of targets out there if Hauser is playing consistently, because that's the guy they're going to go after. Or if it's Pritchard's out there, when Luka's on the court, they're going to go after him. So I think that's going to be such an interesting scheme series if it is Dallas. And by the way, the Celtics have a lot of buttons to press in that series too. Like, they're going to go after Luka. And by the way, Dallas cannot play defense the same way they're playing defense against Minnesota. They're saying, fuck it, let these rest of these guys shoot threes. We're going to pack the paint against Anthony Edwards. Well, guess what? Celtics hit the most threes per game during the regular season. You try to do that against them, it's not going to work. And Jason Kidd has been outstanding after stinking in his previous 2 jobs. He's been great. So I'm sure that wouldn't be their defensive scheme. But right now, I don't have much faith in anybody coming off the bench besides Pritchard. I thought Brissett gave him really good minutes in game 2, not as much in game 3. I thought you mentioned earlier Tillman. I thought Tillman was solid in this game, but I don't think you're going to get any big contribution from anybody offensively off that bench right now.
But they might need it, is the point. I think with Dallas, and to your credit, Dallas is playing a team in the Wolves that plays too big, so they can really pack. Like, as I was trying to explain this to people the other day, if you're and I think I've loved the way Dallas has played. Like, I think they're playing just some excellent basketball both ends of the floor right now. But Boston is a way different defensive assignment than Minnesota is, right? Like, when you have Gobert, you don't have to worry about him going anywhere outside of the paint, really. And Karl Anthony Towns is the dumbest player. I mean, I think Cat's doing better than normal, but like, he's one of the dumbest players left in the playoffs right now. He would drive me crazy if I were a Minnesota fan.
So many like fouls that he doesn't need to commit. He fouls guys like out near half court. It's like, man, they need your offense. And by the way, and we're recording, of course, before the game 3, but his offense, both him and Edwards have been awful offensively in that series.
It's been Naz Reid and Jaden McDaniels, and if those 2 guys are trying to beat, you're probably going to win the game. But like, for me, Dallas, that assignment's going to be way different because Porzingis and Al are going to pull everybody out of the paint, and it's going to be way more wide open for Boston than it is right now for Minnesota. But like, I as you project forward, like, I do think they're going to need somebody to just consistently hit some shots. It's going to be, you can't rely on your starting unit to go 110 of your 114 points every night. You're not going to win basketball. You're going to win a lot of games doing that. And the last thing I want to end on here is the Jaylen Brown snub from the All NBA team. I'm a big fan of the mindset of, okay, if you want Jaylen to be on the team, you have to kick somebody else off the team. And at that point, with so many good performances, who's the guy that's left off? And a lot of people have fallen into the, well, if you're going to put Jaylen on, is it Halliburton or is it Sabonis? And like, I don't want to, like, Halliburton in the first half of the season was just outrageous. I mean, he was ridiculous. And yeah, he played through some injuries in the second half of the year, and it's pretty obvious now that he's probably not coming back in this playoffs, that he probably came back too early. But they brought him back because of monetary reasons, right? Like I think it was Verno and KOC were talking about this, their last pot on the mismatch. It seems like when voters look at these things now, with the way contracts reward all NBA teams, and Jaylen was the benefit of this the year prior, man. Like Jaylen making the all NBA team made him the highest paid player in basketball, right? This is the biggest extension ever. I think media members, whether it's fair or not, and it's whether it's fair that the media decides if guys get bonuses or not, is another thing that we can talk about later. But like, it does seem to play a factor in this whole thing. And if Halliburton, who's now eligible for the Supermax, it seemed like that might have played a part in it. And for Jaylen, yeah, it's a disappointing, sure, but like he had a heck of a season, regardless if he's all NBA or not. And he's a way better player now than he's ever been.
Yeah, well, and with Halliburton in particular, I don't think you can take him off because he also led the league in assists, right? And for the first couple months of the season, he was legitimately like a top 5 player in the league. I'm not saying that's what his status was, but he was playing like a top 5 MVP candidate, right? So I didn't have a problem with that one. But the two that I point out, you mentioned Sabonis. I mean, we just got to get over this. The guy doesn't impact winning. He's empty calories, right? He's like drinking a bunch of beers on Saturday night. He's empty calories. Everybody gets caught up in this double-double thing. The team wasn't that good, right? And you look, what did they finish? 9th? They ended up not even making it into the postseason. They lost in the play-in. And I know this doesn't count for the All-NBA, but he was absolutely atrocious in the Warriors series last year. They just took advantage of him because he's a traffic cone on that end of the court. And then the other guy that I would say is you don't have a statistical argument against Devin Booker. Devin Booker's efficiency, his scoring is better than Jaylen Brown's, but Devin Booker is not an elite defensive player. Not to mention the fact that team was an absolute dumpster fire. And he's a supermax player. He deserves, along with Kevin Durant, some of the blame why that was a dumpster fire. And I watched every single Celtics game this year. How many times did Jaylen Brown say, okay, tonight I'm covering Steph Curry. Oh, I'm going to pick up Luka Doncic, the guy that you mentioned earlier. I'm going to cover the opponent's best wing player. Jaylen Brown did that all season long. That's why he got votes for the all-defensive team. This team won 64 games. We had 2 teams. And look, I'm not saying to take a Laker off, but you had a 49-win team and a 47-win team that each had 2 reps. And I don't want to make it sound as simplistic as that. But when a guy plays to the level that Jaylen Brown did, especially what he does on the defensive end, and a lot of the mindset, and I know voters don't think about it this way, a lot of the mindset of this team, the leadership of this team, Jaylen Brown is the leader, right? Like Tatum's the best player. Jaylen Brown is the leader of this team. I think that's unquestionable at this particular point in time when you hear him talk to the media, when you see the way that he plays, the intensity he brings to the court. So I think his defensive impact, and it's not like he had a bad season offensively. I mean, he's averaging north of 23 points per game on less shots than he had the previous season. So I would have taken both Booker and Sabonis on. In fact, if you had 6 All-NBA teams, I wouldn't put Sabonis on one of them because the guy doesn't impact winning.
Yeah, and that's the thing for me. It's weird because you look at all NBA defense, the all defensive team, like it's just position list, and then you look at the all NBA teams, and like that looks like they tried to kind of follow an NBA structure. I agree with you on the Sabonis point because like I care way more about Jaylen Brown's impact on both sides of the ball than Sabonis scoring and dishing out a bunch of assists and getting a bunch of rebounds. But like that's the spot. And Sabonis got a first place vote by some clown. I forget who the guy is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Some guy was campaigning hard for Sabonis for some reason.
He was probably champagning hard too. He's probably drinking. I shouldn't say that.
I got a bone to pick with Shams Charania putting Balo Banchero on there over Jaylen Brown as well. Like I'm just not.
Perk did too.
I just don't understand. I mean, look, Paolo Banchero is going to be awesome. Like he's going to be awesome. The guy's what, 21 years old, and he's got shoulders like that already. He's going to be a real big problem at some point. But like, I just don't understand how a team that had the most wins in the league this year had what, a 14-game lead over their competition in their conference. Like they only get one All NBA guy. Like it's just crazy to me. But again, if you're going to put one guy on, you got to take one guy off. I subscribe to that theory. And I do believe that Jaylen Brown got a little bit of a snub there. And
yeah,
but I'll tell you this. He's
also go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say Perk also voted Banchero, and Perk's the one that said that Jaylen's better than Tatum. He had Tatum in his first team All-NBA. So either Jaylen Brown jumped from the 16th best player in the league all the way to 4th past Tatum, or Tatum dropped because of the playoffs all the way down to 16th or something along those lines, or like 1's 7th and 1's 8th right now, which is crazy. By the way, I just want to mention this real quickly. I talk about impacting winning, and I get this as last year's postseason. The Kings last year when Sabonis played, -49. With him off the court, they were +34. So he literally cost his team winning a playoff series against Golden State last year. So I talk about impact winning. I'm sort of scarred by that.
Dang. I mean, if Tatum's going to get shit for his NBA Finals 2 years ago, you know what I mean? People are like, oh, we can't. Oh man, like he gets unfairly judged for things that happened 2 years ago. We get to hold against Sabonis.
Well, and Sabonis doesn't shoot threes. Like he can't shoot threes. He's not a good shooter, right? So I mean, I get it. He has all these numbers, but it's just he doesn't really impact winning. Jaylen impacts winning undisputably. I mean, you mentioned the Dallas game where he dropped Luka offensively with a crossover. He had a little bit of a push off, but he won that game for the Celtics because of his defense. Even though Luka got his points, he did it on like 30 shots and 11 free throws.
Yeah, it's like when what was it? DeJounte went off for like 47 points on 44 shots or whatever it was.
Oh yeah.
Well, Joe was like, well, he took 44 shots, so like, what do you want? To wrap up on Jaylen here, I know he didn't make the first team or second team or third team All NBA, but man, his quotes are first team All NBA last night. Like, hang it in the fucking loop was literally one of the funniest things I've heard out of Jaylen's mouth in my entire life. And then comparing the entire Pacers shooting barrage to everybody over looks like bleeping Michael Jordan. Like I just thought he had a couple of heaters last night that were out of control funny, and it's good to see him come out of his shell a little bit like that. I like that.
Well, and this is coming off the big quote after game 2 where he was asked about, are you upset or did this motivate you to perform this way after he didn't get All NBA? What was the quote? I tweeted at the time. It should be on a t-shirt.
Yeah, we got to win. Like, I just want to win 2 more bleeping games or whatever he said.
Yeah, he said, I don't get time to give a shit.
Yeah, we got 2 more games to win. I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to hear. And you know, Boston in a great spot, up 3-0. They are 1 game away from the NBA Finals. History tells us, Barrett, they're going to be in the NBA Finals. We'll see with Porzingis. If I haven't seen any update today as of this recording. It's 12 noon here on the East Coast. I haven't seen anything that would suggest he's going to play tomorrow. The fact that he was not questionable or, you know, doubtful or anything on the injury report for game 3 makes me think he's probably not playing game 4. But, you know, Woj came out with that a while back that he was targeting game 4, but I don't know about you. I haven't seen anything today.
No, but where do you stand on that? Because if they deem he's healthy, because right, obviously we don't know what the medical staff knows. If they deem that he's healthy enough to play in game 4, I'm in the camp of play him because I want him to at least work up a lather before the finals, right? Where it's like, oh, here's Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively coming at you. Like you would kind of want to at least get out there a little bit and also develop some confidence in your calf, right? Like it can be a mental hurdle too, coming back from something like that. So if he can play, and I'm saying if he can play, if they feel like, hey, even if it's a small chance where they say, yeah, we think it's better if he waits. Okay, then do that. But if they say, okay, we're good, calf's healed, he's done the proper stuff, we feel like he's good to go, and the risk of injury is not that high, go ahead. Like I want him in there just to get his feet wet in the postseason. Because, I mean, we're looking at a month, really, right? That he hasn't been in a competitive game.
Well, that was kind of the thing, was like, could they get through the next 2 series without him? And they clearly have. And what a luxury that is, to not have like your third best player playing in 2 straight series and just not having a problem. And again, it's aided by the injuries on the other side. I'm not saying that that's not, a part of this, but to be able to go through 2 series, and they're what are they, 8-1 without him in this?
Yeah, well, he left in game 2, right? The game that they lost.
That was game 3.
Oh, he left game 3. Okay.
Yeah. Middle of game 3.
They lost the 1 game to Cleveland then.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what a luxury that is. And again, back to your point, the high end depth they have is outrageous. Like, it's just to have 4 or 5 guys in the top 50, and then Al Horford, who, 38 years old, hitting 7 threes in a game. It's just a huge luxury that they have. But yeah, one game away from the NBA Finals, one more win, a 48-minute contest away from going to their second NBA Finals in 3 years. And if you had to pick real quick, who's the MVP of this series so far?
Well, I was looking at FanDuel this morning, and now Tatum now has the shortest odds. I had a little thing on Jaylen plus 350 before the series started. I would still, at this point, I know we got to see like what happens in game 4, but at this point I still have Jaylen ahead of Tatum because he had 40 points, but he also hit the biggest shot of the series. So even though Tatum was spectacular in game 3, outstanding. I mean, we just spent a while talking about it. I think you have to put Jaylen in front of Tatum at this point, just because he hit the big shot and he had the 40 points, and he hasn't really had, like, Tatum was, the game 2 for Tatum, the first half was really bad. Obviously he picked it up a little bit in the second half, but Jaylen's game last night was better than Tatum's game 2, I would say. So I would give it to Jaylen just based on the high level moments.
I totally agree. And there's a little sneaky dark horse here. Jrue Holiday's hanging out just as a over here. It's
like plus 1,200, right?
Hey, might be worth it. Might be worth it. But that's Brian Barrett from The Ringer. I'm Evan Valenti. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast and to Off the Pike on the Ringer Podcast Network. Make sure you subscribe to Celtics Beat on iTunes, on Spotify. Make sure you subscribe to the CLNS YouTube page. We're all over the place. And the Garden Report is fired up after every single game, coming live. Sometimes Derek White joins us in the middle of the show, which was pretty awesome. And I think that was in Miami or in Cleveland, where Derek White just dropped in with Josue, and that was pretty fun. But they're crushing it after every game. Make sure you tune into them, tune into all of the stuff that we got going on, because we have a cajillion Celtics podcasts. But for my guy Adam Kaufman, he'll be back next week. For Brian Barrett, I'm Evan Valenti. You guys have yourselves a wonderful Memorial Day weekend and enjoy Game 4. And hopefully next time we talk, it's NBA Finals time.